This was the first mobile game I've ever played, and every other one has been a disappointment ever since. My memories of this game have become vague over the years, and the same has likely happened to yours. So, let me remind you. If you were like me, you may or may not have had a wave of nostalgia from that. Oh, and collecting gold bags / potions during cutscenes. I completely forgot that this was like a major source of money in this game. My main reason to come back was to actually get the Infinity Blade for the first time, something a younger me was not willing to grind out. The intro is a quick tutorial on how to fight, and your guy gets disarmed way too easily. He gets kebabbed, and his kids will now be forever knocking on this castle. Combat is relatively simple. It's been more than a decade since the last Punch-Out game came out, but its influence can still be felt here. You're on defense most of the time. If you try to attack a non-stunned enemy, you will barely do any damage. You stun guys by either blocking, dodging, or parrying. Blocking is easy, but it's a resource, and a block stun is the shortest type of stun. Dodging is directional. Some attacks can only be dodged in one direction. Most of the time it's obvious, but some patterns may take some testing. Parry by swiping in the direction of the incoming weapon. It stuns for the longest, but any attack that uses a limb instead of steel can't be parried. It's been like a decade since I last played this, and it does feel easier now. Kid me mainly dodged, but now I feel a lot more comfortable to just parry everything. Your attacks are simple. You slash into some basic combos and sometimes you get to poke them. There's also some spells. I mostly just used heal. There is a bit of exploration in the castle itself. I thought it was like multiple paths, but it's really just one long path with 2 shortcuts and some optional fights for some treasure. The main path is roughly from the outside of the castle to this hallway, to this bridge, to the rooftops, and then to this big room, up this elevator, to the God King. From this big room, you can go down the stairs into the caverns and find this sword-shaped lock. You can go up and down this spiral forever and just grind dudes if you want. You can skip the rooftops if you just go into the big doors instead of up the stairs. There's an optional fight for a chest in the hallway, and right before the main gates of the castle, you can jump down this hole to get to a cellar area that leads directly to the underground cave. The basement path is basically here to get to the caves faster in case you already have the keys to the lock. Most of the time you want to take the longer path because you'll get more gold bags and treasure chests along the way. The EXP system is tied to gear. The game really incentivizes you to use all of the equipment it offers. The experience you get after every fight is split between your gear. If a piece of gear is maxed out, you won't get that portion of the EXP. Leveling up grants you 2 stat points to invest with, and maxing out a piece of gear grants you 1. I always want enough gold to move on to the next piece of equipment whenever I max one out, which becomes quite hard in the later game as inflation gets real bad. The enemies are predetermined across the map. Well, the type of enemy is predetermined, but the enemy itself is randomized within their category. There are 4 types of opponent: a knight your size, a big guy, a giant, and twin blades. I mean, there's only like 3 twin blade variants, and you only fight one of them during the true ending. It's more of a subtype. I do remember the 2 sword dudes being the rarest type of enemy and the hardest to fight. I don't find them nearly as hard now. I thought it was me getting better, but there's likely a different reason. Early runs have enemies attacking slowly and with very simple patterns. Later playthroughs have them swinging faster and they start doing much fancier moves. Twin Blades start out rather fast, and they're the earliest enemy type to start doing fancy multi-hit combos, which does make them the toughest type of enemy at the start, but as the other categories of guys start to scale up, the average evens out over time. Play this enough and you really get to know the layout of the castle. The true ending of this game is locked behind you buying the Infinity Blade and sticking it into this hole. Meanwhile, you can grind gold by fighting the God King that gets stronger each time you beat him. I've definitely gotten better at fighting the God King. I remember being so hyped as a kid, shanking this guy for the first time. It took me quite a while to do that. It took me even longer to shank him a second time. This time around, by Bloodline 8, I've already killed him 4 times. This was legitimately the first time I've ever seen the true ending to this game. Oh yeah, spoilers. It's too late anyway. Although I already kind of knew what it would mostly entail, the fantasy setting secretly being sci-fi was something the regular ending already kind of showed you. The 5 unique enemies were unexpected and cool to fight, unless you were good at arena mode, in which case that will spoil them for you. Shove the key into the lock to open 3 rooms, each containing a different deathless. The deathless that can talk will vaguely tell you how you messed up. And they all explode into light upon being stabbed by the Infinity Blade. After defeating the imprisoned ones, the center door unlocks, leading into a laboratory. A robot that deals a lot of damage ambushes you, and it's actually a mech suit driven by the first ancestor. He actually pledged loyalty to the God King instead of fighting him. He's the true final boss, but he's much weaker than all of the other enemies we fought at this point, so it's an easy win. At this point, you can either stay in this castle with all of the unique equipment that dropped from the Deathless, or you can go to New Game Plus. This game can be played for quite a while, and I can see why people would. Combat is simple and fun. There's a bit of a mystery about the castle. The graphics were amazing for the time. You've been looking at an upscaled version, but you know what I mean. These are such good enemy and armor designs, mostly. There's a unique sense of progression with the equipment leveling system. The world, while being small, gets to feel familiar. This is more of a thing about the medium and the time, but this game was not pay to win. It's still better than most current mobile games. Infinity Blade has been in limbo for years now. The only way you can legitimately play them is by having an iPhone that had the games installed before they were taken off of the store. I don't know why Epic just does nothing with the IP. If they released all 3 games onto PC as a trilogy, people would buy it. There is a fan-made PC port, but telling a crowd about it might not be so smart as this thing is kind of in a legal gray zone. I'm not too certain. All I know is that I should not be too direct about it. I'm just gonna say you can find a certain subreddit that may help you. There are files you can download to get the later 2 games, and you can sideload them to technically get them playable on PC. But that requires an iOS device. A team is supposed to be working on a more direct port, so maybe at some future point. If by some miracle, Epic does release Infinity Blade as a trilogy on PC, then you should get the games legitimately and disregard what was said at the end of this video. Anyway, best mobile game in the world. I hope it may come back someday. Okay, next is a Greek dude, and after that, maybe Mud and Blood.